Hello everyone, this is Dark Journalist. Today I have a very special episode for you. It's part 2 with Geo-engineering author Elana Freeland on her book Under an Ionized Sky, From Chemtrails to Space Fence Lockdown, all about the planetary control grid being put in place at a mesmerizing speed. Her new book, Synthetic Biology, set for release in 2020, will give us the final AI blueprint for a transhumanist future where human beings are plugged into the Internet of Things, and a kind of Robo DNA sequence signature seeks to replace humanity's quest for spiritual consciousness. From 5G to nanobots to the space fence, Elana's cutting-edge research leaves no stone unturned. Here we go, part 2, with geoengineering author Elana Freeland. Elana, it's great to have you back with us for part 2 of our deep discussion on the weaponization of planet Earth. Now, we went through the space fence in part 1 of our interview, which was amazing. Now we're going to go and expand into key areas like nanotechnology, like 5G, along with the Internet of Things. Now, before we start here, we were just talking about the role of the smartphone in all of this, and I recall being the editor of an Apple technology magazine, actually, in 2007, when the iPhone came out, and the real revolution that it was. Now, the downside, of course, is the incredible distraction factor with people tuning out of reality, becoming part of a virtual reality, and reading their phones as they walk, certainly a hazardous habit. Now, the role of the newer technology as a distraction or a desensitizer is one thing. My question on 5G technology is just how dangerous and how much of a health hazard do you think it is? Now, the 5G little towers, we're seeing them spring up everywhere in all of these neighborhoods. And we do hear of some protests that are happening in communities here in America and, of course, across Europe as well. Unfortunately, in America, for us, the Trump administration recently signed on to it and is really pushing it. So that's a major disappointment. So I guess my question is, how dangerous is it?
Well, it's very dangerous for a variety of reasons. And the person I would listen to that would be Barry Trower.
Okay.
Barry, the radar guy from the Royal Navy years ago. And Barry appears to be retired and is being allowed to speak without any endangerment to himself. At least that's how he presents it. And I definitely can understand him well, given that, I've been studying this to get up to speed like every other American. I mean, this, like you said, it's happened so fast.
Right.
And it is continuing to happen so fast before we wake up too much. I think that the main danger, Dr. Martin Pall has brought out the calcium gates, the fact that it's this phased array antenna setup is able to target, and really work as a mesh would be how I'd like to present it. And this was just an intuition after spending lots of time on this, that when Elon Musk talks about neural mesh, he makes it sound like it's just going to be in your brain, it's going to protect you from AI, blah, blah, blah. But the real neural mesh that's being built is really the smart city plan and activation. And that has to do with all the things we're breathing in. We're breathing in from the chemical trails, just from the chemical trails. We're breathing in, as we know, the conductive heavy metals on a nano scale. A nano is 1/1000th of a meter. You cannot see it. And it's extremely effective, extremely cheap to produce, and it's in everything now. It's in medicines, it's in deodorant, it's in women's cosmetics, it's in new clothes. That's why I never buy new clothes, Daniel. I try not to anyway. So the nano scale is, as I've found in writing the under an ionized sky and since, and with the help of some amazingly attentive people like Tony Pantalaresco, the Canadian or Australian, I'm still not sure which he is, who is experimenting nonstop on how to get the nanos out of our bodies. Because once you start reading about nanotechnology, and you can find some things to read, and I've got a chapter 3, I think it is in the book, on nanotechnology, you see that it's industry loves it because it's cheap and it's unseen. So when you say you buy a packaged pudding or something at the store, it's a packaged, it says healthy, maybe it even says organic, which doesn't mean much anymore if it's from a commercial item, then probably the thickener used is a nanotech something or other, because they've decided it's harmless, it's not going to hurt us, it's just sort of a neutral nothing, which is all basically a fabrication, because it is not really known. There are some things known about nanotechnology, and the reason I'm going on and on to answer your question on 5G is this is the crucial part. The nanotechnology is really, it's made of things from the periodic table, natural things, natural, but when it gets down to that size, it's as though we've entered quantum physics. And now we're in another dimension of behavior, signature, chemical signature, all of those things.
Fascinating. What do you think is, let's say, one of the more surprising features of this? Now, I know the brave new world of the nanotechnology is strange enough, but what is a kind of wild card feature or something that had you stand back and really measure the implications of what this is?
Because scientists are now finding that it behaves with a certain intelligence, nanos, and that I would call that swarm mentality. It has a swarm mentality.
Right.
Where it really came home to me was when Jamie Lee, who does these, is a videographer who does films at his site, came up with a complete study, about 100 videos about the Paradise, California fire. And number 51 of those videos was an interview with as usual, anonymous scientist who came forward to discuss how the fire was lit, what kind of technology probably went into it to ignite this house but not this house, and this thing and not that thing, and how all the trees stood just fine. He said that if you take a really close look at the drone footage of the footprint of these fires, you can see, and I had already noticed this and had pondered it a bit, you can see that the embers, seemingly the embers on the ground, seem to be moving in a strange pattern, as if they know to go to this house but not this house, and they know to go this way but not that way. And what he said was, what you are seeing is a swarm of nanos that are being remotely directed, probably, and I filled in the rest, probably by what I call the laptop boys. These are guys sitting in Colorado Springs or wherever, sipping on an organic orange juice, and directing death from afar.
Yeah.
So these embers, they're kind of like, they look like embers, but are they embers? No, he says no. If you really look at them, you'll see that this is a swarm of nanobots. So that's kind of what I'm saying, is we're dealing with something that looks natural, maybe was natural when it was on even a micron level, not on a nano level. And then remember, they're going smaller and smaller. The next one down from nano, I think, is uh, petameters or something like that. And then there are 5, 6, 7, 8 categories below that. So what are we entering here with the nanotechnology? That's my question. So now let's go back to the human beings. We have inhaled conductive metals, aluminum, barium, strontium, chromium, titanium, lithium, etc., from the chemical trails being used to keep our atmosphere, keep enough particulate matter in the atmosphere that is conductive that they can constantly ionize whatever they need in order to do all their wireless operations. And one of the most important, as you know, is weather, do the weather engineering. But now if all that is now inhaled by us, whatever doesn't stay above the planet and get involved in the centrifugal force of the spinning planet. And that also has to do with Star Wars, SDI stuff, and the space wars that are gearing up, if not already running their own experimental phases with China, Russia, etc. Then we inhale that into our lungs, it goes, then into the bloodstream, it goes through the walls of the lungs, through the heart, it goes through all the blood, and eventually ending up at the brain, where the blood-brain barrier, which has protected us to a degree from maybe micron level chemicals and pathogens, etc., is no sweat for the nanoparticle. It just slips right in there. So now we have, our brains are full of nanoparticles, our bodies are full of nanoparticles. We have the heavy metal problem, which all goes all the way from Alzheimer's to you know, what's going on with children now and autism.
Yes.
We have all the new so-called diseases, which I believe are actually symptoms of the autoimmune diseases, chronic fatigue, etc. All of this is connected to this nanoparticle matrix that has been laid in us. And did they know this, or are we just sort of, you know, okay, we're going to lose a few humans, but we've got to have this technology for our secret space program? Well, no, I used to think that initially. I thought, so we're just collateral damage. But no, we're not. No, this is very much about a transhumanist singularity future, about a cyborg human that can make it through the Van Allen belts, for example, that will not, you know, doesn't have to wear a lead suit in order to get through it. Or think of it this way, we're so BCI, we're so brain-computer interfaced with computers, AI systems, supercomputers, whatever, that we can, you know, maybe remote view our way through the Van Allen belts to the rest of the solar system. So basically what's that saying is what we all know, is that for the masters of the universe here that live on planet Earth and are attempting to escape it while destroying it, and I don't think of aliens when I think of that, I think of very wealthy, very intelligent, very educated people who seemingly have abandoned their humanity, the best parts of humanity, compassion, wisdom, you know, an ability to care about the masses of humanity that are not as evolved as they are, etc. They have abandoned that. And so if we go back to, again, another scientific fact, that nature abhors a vacuum. So if that place where their humanity used to live, perhaps in their conscience, in their heart area, in their brain, wherever, there's a vacuum there. So something will fill it, and it will be something that is not human. Now, whether we want to get into an argument over aliens versus demons, to me, they're all the same. They're anti-human because they have no understanding of what it is to be human. And that now, with the coming of the 5G, and by the way, it's already here. I don't waste my time finding out what's scheduled where. We know how the liars work. I actually was told by someone I respect that the 4G phones already have the phased arrays in them, which is what they said they were going to put in the 5G. So we already have it. It's already happening. And these small towers that are going to be every 2 houses or whatever, I mean, who can tell? There's tiny towers everywhere, just like there's very small ionospheric heaters all over the place. They don't have to be the size of HAARP anymore and take up acres. They now can be very small because you can have a lot of them. And again, we're looking at the possibility of a swarm mentality. And you and I are both students of Rudolf Steiner to one degree or another. We know what that means. We would use the word ahrimanic. We would use the idea of an ahrimanic entity, which is basically a collective being, really kind of digging in its heels into any place where the truly human has been abandoned. And that, to me, is what 5G will do. Now, Tony Pantalaresco yesterday sent me a wonderful statement that has to do with how these pathogens, like Morgellons, they grow. They not only reproduce, but they create that mesh in us. And we have a mesh now outside of us that we can't see. That would be all manner of various waves going this way and that for trillions of wireless operations.
Right.
So we have that mesh, and it does form a mesh. And then we have this mesh inside from the nano-sized entities, that's the heavy metals, sensors. The military has admitted that they are releasing trillions of sensors in the upper atmosphere so that they can track the weather, they can do chemical composition signatures, they could do all manner of things up there. And many of those end up centrifugal, but many of them drop to the earth along with gravity. So we have the sensors, they're in us. We have the microprocessors, which is basically a word for very teeny weeny little computers that are like the sensors, transceivers. They transmit, they receive. They are able to be programmed remotely. They don't need to operate on you anymore. They don't need to necessarily stick an implant in you anymore in order to control you. Now we have the implants already in us. And they are being, their energy source is us, very much like some of the earlier implants that they finally figured out how, we don't need lithium, we don't need anything like that, we can just plug right into the human body. So then we have the pathogens also in us. And I know it's confusing to people how some people end up with Morgellons, the sores and the little wires sticking out of the sores. And now we are finding more and more of these lesions ejecting hexagons over and over and over and over again. And now this is part of synthetic biology that I'm definitely going to pursue in the book. I have a few sources that are able to see into that, what that is coming from. And part of that is esoteric. It's very esoteric. And if I'm thinking esoteric for hexagons coming out of Morgellons lesions, you can bet your bottom dollar I'm thinking of nanotech, which we know nothing about as far as its true spiritual, if you will, at least metaphysical signature when it's operating in its swarm consciousness.
Fascinating. Now, how would we connect up then the 5G aspect with all of this?
So now the 5G gets in league with the Internet of Things in the smart city. I mean, you are so plugged in. They're changing your thoughts by pulsing you. They're pulsing you with emotions that you didn't even know a good reason for feeling. And now, like Tony said in the email yesterday, this goes straight to the cells, as Martin Paul indicated, and they can reprogram our cells. And this is how transhumanism is going to happen, is on this microcosmic level. You know, you go back to the Middle Ages and with Leonardo da Vinci's 1500s drawings of the macrocosm versus the microcosm. Well, in a way, the macrocosm is chemical trails, HAARP, the stratosphere, the ionosphere, the magnetosphere, CERN, all of that. That's the big guys.
Okay.
But they're all connected to the fact that now there's a microcosmic element that is being very meticulously developed, in the sense that, oh, gee, we don't know what's going to happen, but we're really interested. And, you know, if we lose a few million people, so what? Is that usual American stance on science. We here on planet Earth, my feeling is that, you know, I've already talked a lot about weather, I've talked about a lot of things, but now I'm really seeing that my main job, besides educating people as to how the technology works, is to really talk some sense into them. Everybody thinks they have common sense. I don't know that that's true. To get the common sense going again, that can see that they need to take care of their immune system, or they're going to be pushovers for this 5G assault. Pushovers. It'll just be communicating with our nanobots, completely bypass our conscious mind, so-called. I don't know how conscious a lot of people are now, because they're surrounded by wireless technology all the time, and who knows what the wireless, I mean, you know, they haven't even agreed yet on what electricity is.
Right.
But if you think about wireless tech, again, a matrix has been formed. What is traveling along those matrices? What is that? Is there something that is not burdened with a physical body like we are? You know, in other words, we should start thinking like the masters of the universe are thinking, the ones at the top. I'm sure they're doing esoterics. I am absolutely sure they read Rudolf Steiner, just like the Jesuits do.
Definitely.
They have taught us that that's all nonsense. They have taught us all to be materialists, so that we can't even begin to think on the tiny scale. I mean, as long as those bacteria we were studying and those viruses, we had to wait for the microscope to come to know anything. Do you think they had to wait that long? I don't think so. I think they had the technology for many centuries. And you've talked about that in your X series. And it's important to know that these masters of the universe are very prepared for this era. Why they chose this era has to do with Tesla. He had to live and bring what he brought. They didn't have all the pieces anymore. All the pieces go way back to the Vedas. They didn't have all those pieces anymore, and they weren't able to know everything. So they had to wait for an opportune time. Probably this has to do with the stars and the planets. It probably has to do with a certain arrival of a certain consciousness that the vanguard of humanity has achieved. I mean, there is a vanguard, it's very tiny, but you know, thus has humanity always moved, with the vanguard dragging the masses behind them. And now they are setting it all up. And the space fence is just a sort of umbrella nomenclature I use to make it clear that this is corporate. Lockheed Martin owns all the patents and runs the whole shebang, just as Raytheon owned all the patents for HAARP and ran the whole thing, just as the CIA is actually a synonym for Lockheed Martin and Raytheon. So, so we have this situation now where the 5G is coming out, and can consciousness make a difference with this technology? I believe it can. I absolutely believe it can. But it's going to take people facing their conditioning and their programming of a lifetime and shoving it out of the way and really beginning to concentrate on what it means to be in a world full of levels of consciousness that we can't see. I mean, that's the beauty of this time, in my mind. We're dealing with something we can't see.
Right.
And we don't have the money to buy the $100,000, $150,000 electron microscope. We're going to have to use our thinking apparatus in order to understand how these things are working. And that's where the book comes in.
Right. The new book is really going to bring these worlds together. Now, one thing I'd like to ask you here, Elana, is since you have such a good grasp of history and understand the large arc of humanity coming to grips with our spiritual consciousness, how do you see the time that we're in right now?
To me, this is the time when we can learn to peer into the invisible. This is a time when we're going to be examining where that veil that all the ancient spiritual texts talk about, the veil between the worlds, now is being hit and ripped apart as through technology. And we can now do some work instead of, oh my, where's Martin Luther King when you need him? There is no one coming.
Yeah.
And, we are the demos. We are the people. We are the democratic vanguard of human evolution. And the reason I'm working 24/7, pretty much just, I don't even remember what a private life is. Vaguely remember I had one years ago. But my public life is certainly enough because this is my investment here for the future. I want to be able to come back and really kick, what. That's my plan, Daniel.
Right.
So I'm working very hard to learn as much as I can to understand the minds of those pitted against people like me, people who believe in human consciousness evolution, people who don't sit around bad-mouthing human beings because a few have gotten really rogue and out of hand, people who feel that they are somehow entitled to a life of peace and freedom and everything without doing anything. That's not how it's ever been here.
Yeah.
You have to fight tooth and nail to stay awake, first of all. Well, to get awake, first of all, and stay awake. Then take hold of some things within your particular gifts and your particular reason you came to planet Earth this time, and get busy and do everything you can. Just pushing off your fear, your anxiety, your dreams of having been whatever, and really invest in the future of humanity, because I seriously think that it is now in peril. And I'm a believer in a divine world. I know there are divine beings far beyond my consciousness. The problem is this, my dear religious friends out there. We are free will beings. Rudolf Steiner even said that the human being is the religion of the gods. And the reason he said that is because we are the only spiritual being, to my knowledge, that is pursuing freedom while in a body. And so given that struggle that is endemic to incarnation on this planet, we need to take it very seriously. It's a gift to be here. I'm not looking for an easy life. I'm looking for truth. I'm looking for beauty and goodness, the three virtues that the Greeks knew that the human being deserved, but would have to really go after. No one's going to hand you those beyond your childhood. If you had a good childhood, good for you. I didn't. I was prepared early for struggle.
Right.
And so, you know, for those of us who were prepared early, let's look at it as, yeah, okay. Yeah, that's how I decided to do this time around. So I should let you talk now, Daniel. I'm sorry, I'm just going on and on and on.
No, I'm enjoying all of this. Actually, it's a great, rich tapestry, and I think you're laying out the factors incredibly well. It's also interesting because we really have stepped into it. There was a precursor there back in the 80s with Star Wars, and you reference it, and you can see, and you've mentioned to me that they had something going with SDI and Star Wars, but they weren't quite ready. The atmosphere wasn't really ready for them, but you can see that blueprint starting to arise in that period. And it's the Reagan era.
That's right. That's why they put it to bed. They passed it to Clinton when he was elected, and he renamed it the Ballistic Missile Defense System, which is not ever what it was intended to be. And it went black. It basically just went black. And then right around that time, of course, you're talking 92 now, 93, 94. Lo and behold, who do we have? Bernard Eastland with his 1987 patents for HAARP, the High Frequency Active Aurora Research Project. And he spells it out so beautifully. I think in Chemtrails HAARP book, I spend all of chapter 2 basically deconstructing that one patent to show that it needed chemical trails of nanoparticles. It absolutely needed that, you know, you can't, clear air, you can't pass much of anything in a waveform through clear air. You have got to have particulate matter. The military likes to call it chaff, but they began to see that, yeah, okay, they were going to need chaff in order to fulfill what HAARP could do, which was zap the ionosphere, get a lot of ions moving up there, bring them down here, and get our atmosphere to be electric, to get our atmosphere to be a huge antenna itself, a huge microwave antenna as well. So, that was the idea of HAARP. It was very successful. Then they shut it down in about 2013, as I recall, and let it kind of percolate a little bit. The Air Force was happy, the Navy was happy, because they were running it by then. They passed it to the University of Alaska at Fairbanks. And then, the story was, well, should we just shut it down and dismantle it? Oh, maybe. Or should we just let, individuals come and do a little research for, I mean, it was all nonsense. It was all just a charade. Really, they need HAARP because a lot of these extreme weather events, you've got to have HAARP because it's different from the other ionospheric heaters. Also, if you're going to use it as a real weapon, like on 9/11, then you've got to have the one with the big juice, along with two others with less juice, like the one at Brookhaven National Labs, the one down in Puerto Rico, Arecibo. So the ionospheric heaters are extremely important to running the weather and running the planet through weather threat. A fantastic weapon. And of course, you have to keep it on the hush-hush because who in this country is going to like the fact that, they need to keep doing experiments to make sure they're pumping enough iron to really, use it as a weapon abroad. They're going to use our domestic land for that, and our various regions, all of which are really have a different geomagnetism as well. And geomagnetics is crucial to controlling human beings. And I will be writing about that in the book, but I normally don't discuss that because I don't understand the deep mechanics of it well enough yet. I have not really studied it. But Rudolf Steiner said many years ago, over 100 years ago, that Geo-medicine was the future. And that is true. Tony Pantalaresco is having great success with creating small magnetic fields on the human body and driving the nanobots out. I mean, by the billion. So the idea that we're going to have geomedicine now using magnetics, not just chemicals, is brilliant, because we're going to have a way to handle these nanobots.
Amazing. I'm definitely getting the impression when you're discussing these factors and forces that there's a hint here of a major leap in our logic on all of this that's necessary. Can you spell that one out for us here?
I think what I'm saying is that, yes, this Morgellons, at least as one pathogen, has been genetically engineered to be able to be remotely controlled.
Wow.
And that fits with the 5G as well.
So they can activate it at a distance.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes. Yes.
That's remarkable. The name of your chapter in the book is Nano-assaults. And now we start to kind of feel the assault part there for sure. It's interesting to me when we look at all these particulates and the atmosphere and how we become part of that, so we can become, basically what you're saying is sort of walking towers ourselves. The idea that this scientist friend of yours is developing something to draw that out of us is pretty interesting. I wasn't aware of that research.
When you say draw what out?
Well, it just sounded to me from what you were saying about him and his work that he, this kind of geomedicine that you were discussing that Steiner had predicted, it sounded like your friend was working on something to draw those particulates out of the system.
Right, right. Because the problem with the nanoparticles is that we're breathing in billions every day. You know, if you want to just have not a happy camper experience, but an interesting experience, you can buy on the net a 60 power, very small microscope. And let me show you mine. There it is.
Oh yeah.
$7.
Wow.
And it's got an LED on it. It's got a UV light. And I take this if I want to remind myself why I'm doing what I'm doing. I go to the grocery store. It can be my food co-op that I dearly love here in Olympia. And I take a peek really close at the organic produce.
Oh.
Loaded with fibers. Loaded with fibers.
Fascinating.
So yes, I still eat organic because it is not genetically modified, to my knowledge. But I am under no illusion about how these fibers are everywhere. Another thing you can do is just take a really good flashlight, maybe even an LED flashlight, out in the dark on a clear night, flash a big beam, and enjoy the spectacle of millions and billions of fibers swimming around in the air. Now, this is the people that want to call this pollution. This is far beyond pollution, because yes, the pollution before of yesteryear was when corporations were greedy and didn't care about who was going to suffer, just as long as they had a good team of lawyers to back them up. This is different. This is intentional. This is an experiment on humanity. And they're tweaking it. I'm sure they're adjusting it as they go. They're hacking into hospital records. As you know, if you took your Morgellons lesion to a doctor 10 years ago, you would be diagnosed as having delusional parasitosis. You felt you had creepy crawlies crawling around under your skin. No specimen would be taken, but you would be sent down to the psych ward for a psychological battery of tests. So it hasn't changed much since then, though slowly, as you notice, they are normalizing a lot of things now because they can't keep Pandora's box shut much longer.
Right.
They've normalized geoengineering as soon as Trump got in office.
Right.
Bill Gates' boy, David Keith, was talking about, well, gee whiz, we're going to have to do it. Really a shame. But hey, well, that's the way it is.
Right.
After 20 years of doing it. And now then Trump enacts the National Space Council.
Right.
And then we have what's it called? The Space Corps?
Space Force, yes.
Space Force, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, Space Force. So, slowly, and now we have the UFO thing going on. I mean, I'm being barraged by people trying to convince me that the aliens are coming. And it's like, this is just a PR thing going on here.
That's the CIA UFO operation.
Exactly. Just like all the other things have been the CIA, as far as I'm concerned, because they are not what they seem. They are not an intelligence agency. They're more like a corporate, more than a cheerleader, but something along those lines. It is the CIA serves the corporatocracy that runs this country and much of many other countries. So each one of these fear tactics is simply to divert us from really studying the technology.
Yeah.
And I am certainly willing to say that, and I've already talked about it in our talk today, that if you abandon your humanity, then various entities that are not human and that actually see human beings as being dinner, perhaps, or dessert, will move in and affect your thoughts and your emotions and everything else, because you have abandoned your humanity, so you are theirs. This is the deal. They have to have you complicit, they being whatever entities you want to drum up in your head. I mean, I personally don't think about them that much, but I know they exist. I know they exist. We are not the only conscious entities in the solar system or universe, but I do maintain we are the only ones with free will. And yet most people make very poor use of their free will because their free will gets very confused in their minds with their desires.
Mm-hmm.
That is not the same thing as freedom. I don't know if anyone's noticed that. I think every drug addict has noticed that. It is not the same as freedom. So while we're in agreement that there are entities on the move, and especially in this luscious to them radiated environment that we have now. I mean, it's got to be yummy, just like so many of what Trevor Constable popularized in his book, The Cosmic Pulse of Life. Great book, by the way, Daniel.
Okay.
Talks about Rudolf Steiner, talks about Wilhelm Reich, Ruth Dyer is her name. She also was involved in radionics. Just a wonderful book. And Trevor, I had the honor to email with him a bit before he died. Wonderful guy, tremendously brilliant. He set up cameras on the Mojave Desert and photographed with infrared film these entities that look a lot like the microbes I studied when I was in college in biology. They're like, you know, kind of goofy looking guys, like big, giant, bulbous, look like they eat too much. And then little tiny eyes kind of close together and you know, kind of bouncing around up there, kind of looking and grokking what's going on planet Earth in the radiated by then, because we, you know, had the radar installations in World War II. They liked that yumminess, and Wilhelm Reich attempted to go deeply into that. And what was it that they really liked, in order to, so that we could prepare ourselves to not be munched ourselves, I assume. But that, of course, fell by the wayside, like so many good ideas, and he was killed.
They shut him down harder almost than anybody.
Oh, they did. And they used the Food and Drug Administration to do it.
Right.
And killed him, literally killed him with a heart attack, probably electromagnetic, a week before he was due to get out of the federal prison. So, yeah, I'm a big fan of Reich, and I understand the Reich technology because I understand ether, thanks to Rudolf Steiner. And I'm going to go back into ether in this next book to give people the keys to the kingdom of how to look at these different types of energy. I mean, antipodal is ether and electromagnetics. Ether is life, electromagnetics is death. And yet, we cannot do without electromagnetics because our thinking, our ability to think and cognize is set up along electrical lines of the doppelganger that lives within us. And so we can't just badmouth, ooh, electromagnetics, we can't do that. We've got to, but we need that other concept. And that was removed from science, as I say in chapter 2 of the Under an Ionized Sky book. I explain how that happened. They took that concept away from us in the early 1920s. Even Einstein was still using the word ether, but they told him no more, no more. So he shut up. I mean, he was really their boy. So, so I want people to understand these different systems of energy so that we can understand entities and don't have to import, well, I don't know, reptilians and all the rest. I'm not saying that they don't exist. I think what I'm saying is we're going to have to, and I wrote this morning actually, we're going to have to finally come to terms with what being human is so that we know what we're defending. Now, if we use the very lowest human being on the totem pole to define humanity, that would be the power monger, the psychopath, the child molester, the Satanist, whatever. They're all pretty low. They have lost their way. Then I don't understand why people do that. I put my benchmark a little higher there. My benchmark has to do with some of the great artists of the past, the great philosophers, great beings who achieved a lot and gave more of themselves. So I think everyone's going to have to decide what being human really means if they want to join me in defending humanity, because some people have, and they may be more than people, they may be vacuum, you know, the vacuum in them may be filled with entities that despise humanity, but they are in charge to a great degree on this planet now. So now we need to get very clever and look at low-tech things like Reich technology. Take another look at it. Decide how we have been conditioned to think it's all nonsense. All you materialists out there who've decided there's nothing spiritual and it's just a crutch. You may have to take another look at that, because you're really turning your nose up at a lot of power that could be very helpful to us in our struggle for the last free will being in the universe, basically. Because if they have their way here with this 5G and the nanobots in us, we're all going to be slaves. Well, not all of us, but the majority will be slaves without even knowing it. And they may love their bondage. It's certainly been done before. But maybe not on this scale, because we now have, what do they say, 6 billion, 7 billion people
7.
on the planet. So, we could say that, oh, the birth controls really sucks on this planet. Or we could say, why do all these people want to be here now?
Yes.
Why now? Well, everybody wants in. Why? Oh, well, we could be headed for destruction. That's true, but that doesn't really make sense, does it? That you'd want to be there to go down. But anyway, whatever it is, I think one of the most important things is that everybody sit down and really think over what is a human being, so that we can understand why it's so attractive to the masters of the universe to have us plugged into a computer, to be a BCI, a brain-computer interface. To be, that's how remote viewing is done. It's not done with psychic ability. It's done through computers. It's the first BCI that happened back in the 70s was remote viewing. So I've known a few remote viewers, by the way, so I'm up on that. So let's get our priorities straight. It's not to shove our head in the sand and hope the storm blows over us. That didn't go very well for Job either, as I recall. And now we can really take up our tasks, whatever they are. Everybody has a different task. Not everybody has to do what I do. Take up our tasks with vigor and with love for the best in humanity, the best in the planet. Become as we would be were we not having to also grapple with nanobots inside of us that are trying to tell us how to think and feel. I know it's going on. So if you have a cell phone, may I suggest not only that you turn your router off at night, not only that you assume airport mode will not save you, but that you put your cell phone, if you insist on having one, out in your car while you sleep. Do everything you can to protect where you sleep, because there's far more going on while you're asleep than just going unconscious. You are actually, and I've had many experiences along these lines, you are actually leaving your body, and you are going, in a way, going home, in a way going where you as a spiritual being are understood, while your body is left in bed for your ether body, your etheric body, your life body, to heal all your small wounds from the day and rejoice that the weight of carrying you has been dispensed with for the night. Why else do targeters, the first thing, take someone's sleep from them? Why are they concentrating on the sleep? Don't you get it? It's the most valuable thing. And without it, you can't fulfill your dreams and have a healthy body till you leave this planet. So, for good. So I'm recommending to people, no cell phones by your bed. Sleep with your head to the north. Sleep on a bed that has no metal in it, so that you're not transmitting. It's not being transmitted into you. Check what's going on in the apartments or the houses next door. Needless to say, that includes smart meters and all the rest. So take the electromagnetic technology seriously and start studying how it works. It's an infrastructure.
Right.
And you can ameliorate the situation. It isn't a matter of going, oh, well, we're just going to have to live with it. We've always had something we've had to, I don't understand the doom and gloom idea at all. Aren't you any more creative than that? Who taught you to be so doom and gloom and to just accept your fate with no fight? Bah, humbug, I say. Because we have a human race, our children, our grandchildren, their grandchildren, on and on. We have a human race to stand for. And that's our responsibility for being human. Otherwise, we would have come back as maybe a worm or something. I don't know. I don't hold a worm responsible for this. But
we have a lot of worms in the system now as it is.
yes, exactly.
Elana, just incredible. The book is Under an Ionized Sky, From Chemtrails to Space Fence Lockdown. Just amazing information. The new book is Synthetic Biology, due out in 2020, just in time. So Armand, watch out. We will be having a transhumanism roundtable, by the way, for subscribers coming up later in August. So go to darkjournalist.com right now and become a member. Elana, we'll talk soon, and have a great night over there.
Oh, I'm so glad. Thank you.
By all these topics, you really kind of expanded my thinking today.
Of course. Your thinking's always expanding.